All right, so when I say Italy, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it, the Colosseum, a big plate of pasta, maybe zipping around on a Vespa? Yeah, all iconic stuff. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at a side of modern Italy that's way more complex and honestly a lot more fascinating.
It's a really good question to kick things off, isn't it? Because we so often fall back on these simple cliches. But the truth, especially for a country as layered and as deep as Italy, is always, always more interesting than the postcard version.
So think of it like this. We're going to be weaving a giant, intricate tapestry. Each story we explore is a different thread. We've got history, culture, technology, even just everyday life. And as we pull on these threads together, you'll start to see this incredible, sometimes surprising, and even contradictory picture of Italy as it is right now. Our very first thread has to be Italy's incredible legacy. And to really get it, we're going to trace an idea that connects a saint from the 1200s all the way to the Pope today. It's a story that spans a mind-boggling 800 years.
Now, you might think the very first piece of Italian literature would be some huge, grand epic, right? A story of heroes and battles. Nope. It's actually a hymn, a prayer called the Cantico of the Creatures, dictated by St. Francis of Assisi. And this is wild. This simple praise song for the natural world from 8 centuries ago is basically the starting point for the Italian language we hear today. And the influence of that one piece of writing is just immense. It echoes right through the centuries. 100 years later, the great poet Dante is praising St. Francis. And then fast forward to right now, and Pope Francis kicks off his huge statement on protecting our planet by quoting that exact same 800-year-old hymn. It's this single, unbroken thread connecting a medieval saint's love for nature to our most urgent modern concerns about the environment. Amazing. Okay, next thread. Let's talk about the sheer vibrancy of Italian culture. We're talking about the literal colors of its towns, the electric energy of its national festivals, and some really big moments happening in its film industry. I'm sure you've seen pictures just like these. They're gorgeous. But the color you see in Italy often goes way beyond just looking pretty. Take Burano, near Venice. The houses are painted these incredibly bright colors for a very practical reason. It helped the fishermen find their way back home through the super thick fog on the lagoon. It's a perfect example of how beauty and purpose are just woven into the fabric of daily life there. Now let's talk about energy on a massive scale. 3,500 kilometers. That is the insane length of the Giro d'Italia. And it's so much more than a bike race. It's basically a traveling national party, painted pink, that covers almost the entire country. It turns the whole landscape into one giant stadium. The race itself is a journey through modern Italy. I mean, this year it actually kicked off in Albania, then crossed the sea to wind its way through all these different regions, from Puglia to Tuscany, up through the Dolomites, before this massive grand finale in Rome. It really puts the country's incredible diversity on full display. And speaking of culture, this was a huge deal, a truly historic moment. We're talking about the David di Donatello Awards. Think of them as Italy's Oscars. For the first time in the ceremony's 70-year history, a woman, Paola Cortellesi, won for Best Director. That's a massive milestone. It says a lot about how the industry is changing. Okay, let's pull on a thread that I think might really surprise you. We're going to take a classic stereotype about Italy, put it up against some cold, hard data, and then look at the nation's powerful, modern engine. We all have this romantic idea of the Italian lifestyle, right? Super relaxed, dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. Well, hold on. The actual data tells a completely different story. According to Eurostat, Italians are actually among the hardest working people in the entire EU. Get this, nearly 1 in 3 employees in Italy regularly works on weekends. That's almost 31%. It's a huge jump from the EU average of around 19%. So yeah, that whole stereotype, the data just blows it right out of the water. And all that hard work is helping to fuel a pretty serious transformation. Look at this number. That's a massive 75% surge in the sales of purely electric cars in just the first quarter of 2025. Italy is really hitting the gas, so to speak, on electric vehicles. But And this is a classic Italian story that progress isn't spread out evenly. The EV charging grid is still really concentrated in the wealthier north. They have almost 60% of all the chargers. So it shows you both sides of the coin. Really fast progress, but also these deep-rooted regional imbalances that are still there. All right, let's pull on a more personal thread now. We're going to look at the changing habits of daily life, from the pets that Italians adore to the snacks they celebrate. So, more than half of all Italians own a pet, and that's a big deal. It's created a pet food market that's worth over 3 billion euros. But here's the little twist you might not expect. We tend to think of Italy as a dog country, but it's actually the cat food market that's bigger, making up 56% of sales by value. Go figure. And from four-legged friends to food. You know, only in Italy would a simple little sandwich, the Tramezzino, get its name from one of the country's most famous poets. Gabriele D'Annunzio came up with it. The name means in between, for a little snack between meals. It's such a simple classic, but it's constantly being reinvented. It's a perfect example of how even a simple thing gets elevated by culture. For our last thread, we're going to look to the future. We'll see how Italy is taking its ancient connection to the land and weaving it together with a really modern push for sustainability and new technology. Up in the famous Alps, there's this project that's been going on for over 20 years. They award these green flags to communities that are excelling in sustainable farming, tourism, and projects that keep local culture strong. This is way more than just about keeping the mountains looking pretty. It's a really deep effort to build a future for these regions as they face challenges like climate change. And you see this spirit of blending the old and new everywhere. Things like the National Castle Days show how these ancient fortresses aren't just ruins to look at from a distance. No. They're being used for events, for hotels, for learning. They're making their history a living, breathing part of today. Which brings us right to the farm, where tradition is meeting technology head-on. A full 2/3 of Italians agree that digital tech is absolutely essential for the future of their food and agriculture sector. And what's really cool is that this isn't some niche belief of young people. The support is strong across every single generation, from Gen Z all the way to the baby boomers. So when we finally step back and look at the whole tapestry we've been weaving, you see these incredible contrasts, right? It's a nation shaped by 800-year-old prayers and by digital farms. A place famous for its vibrant festivals, but powered by some of the hardest working people in Europe. All these threads that seem so different are actually what create the rich, complex, and true story of Italy today. So that leaves us with one last big question, doesn't it? In a country with so many contradictions and so much diversity, what's the one common thread that runs through it all? Maybe it's not something you can measure or put on a chart. Maybe it's more of a feeling, a spirit. This incredible mix of resilience and creativity. It's what allows Italy to honor its past so deeply, while at the same time constantly, and often surprisingly, reinventing its future.